Motherhood is hard. I'd go as far as to say that sometimes it is a straight up struggle, and sometimes it can feel like we're going through this all alone. There are plenty of moments where I think to myself, why is this so hard for me? Why can't I have this figured out yet? Why are other moms doing so much better at all of this than I am? But the fact of the matter is that I am not alone in feeling like I'm struggling through motherhood sometimes. And if you ever feel that way, you are also not alone. But if we aren't talking about it, it's hard to really recognize that others are facing similar hardships in their motherhood experiences. And that's why I want to break the silence. I want us to stop suffering alone and instead share our experiences with one another to lift each other up and unite in the struggle. Because as Brené Brown said, shame can't survive being spoken. Welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Hardy, a mom of two on a mission to help moms everywhere feel less alone. This is not a parenting podcast. Instead, it's a space for pushing back against societal expectations of perfection and embracing self-compassion in your motherhood journey. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Worthy Mother Podcast. I'm Emily, and in case you are new here or you haven't tuned in a bit, I will quickly introduce myself. I am a mom of two young boys who are 6 and 4 currently, living in California. I am currently going through a divorce and getting used to co-parenting and living life as a single mom and all that comes with that, and I have been sharing that here on the podcast. I am a former elementary school teacher, and in 2022, I started this podcast as a way to create a platform to have conversations about motherhood and society that I just wasn't hearing. A big inspiration for starting this podcast was my own experience of having many aha moments after the birth of my second son when I'd hear other moms talking about various challenges that they were having that in many ways I had been too ashamed to admit even to myself that I was also dealing with, particularly around sensory overload and mental health. Other moms sharing their experiences vulnerably quite literally changed my life, and it became my mission to learn about why motherhood does feel like such a struggle and educate other moms to know that they are not alone in this experience. So here I am, 4 years into my work as a motherhood studies practitioner and nearly 3 years into this podcast. And I want to talk really explicitly about why sharing our motherhood experiences out loud can have such a positive impact on our mental health and just on the experience of motherhood itself. Before we get into it, I would like to ask that you make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast wherever you listen so that you are reminded of new episodes every week. And if you have found value in any of these episodes, that you leave a rating and review for the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Doing so not only means the world to me, I appreciate it so much, you taking the time to do that, but it also helps this podcast reach other moms who want to be a part of the conversation. And in the spirit of speaking vulnerably and sharing experiences, I think that is really the most important thing here, that we are reaching as many moms as possible and letting every single one know that they are not alone in the struggle. So the reason I want to talk about breaking the silence around our struggles in motherhood is because there is this kind of stigma out there about sharing the things that are hard in motherhood. I think oftentimes moms are afraid to share experiences that are challenging in motherhood or things that they really hate about motherhood or whatever it is for fear of backlash and judgment, because there's so many times we get these messages of enjoy every moment, or you chose to have kids, so suck it up, buttercup, right? The reality is that motherhood can feel like a struggle sometimes. Really, no matter who you are, what you're doing, there are going to be hardships in mothering just because of the way our world is set up for moms, the systems we're navigating, the extremely high standards and expectations on moms that we're facing regularly. Just last week, we had a conversation with Dr. Giselle Goodwin on the podcast about the double bind that mothers are in, facing the pressure to work and provide for the family while also being this full-time, 100% attention-giving caregiver that women historically have been expected to be. We're expected to do it all. And wherever you fall on that spectrum, you're falling short somewhere, right? And so the reality is that there is a lot of pressure, and whether you're struggling mentally with the guilt of not living up to those expectations or more physically with trying to manage it all, trying to juggle it all and not being able to, and even facing burnout, there are hardships that will come about. Of course, there's ways to mitigate those things, and that's a lot of the work we're doing here. But the fact of the matter is that you probably, if you are raising children, if you are a mother, you probably are facing some sort of hardships at different times, some sort of struggles in your experiences at different times. And the thing is that those struggles, those hardships can feel so individualized, so unique to us as this one person. But when we come together and share and understand that, like, wow, other moms are facing similar hardships, even if it's not the same thing, but we're all navigating this world. We're all navigating the different pressures. When we can actually share in that vulnerably, it is incredible. I recently started spending time with a group of moms at my son's school. And when we come together and one person shares something about what they're dealing with their kids or with their partner, and then we can all start sharing our own experiences from that and recognize by the end of the conversation, like, whoa, that thing that I was carrying that not only felt hard because it was hard, but also felt shameful and also felt scary, now no longer feels shameful and scary. It's still hard, but I know I'm not alone in that struggle. And just the countless times I've seen this in my own life when having conversations with others and realizing that I am not alone in my struggle, or talking to another mom and relating to an experience she's had and seeing that light bulb moment of, oh my God, I'm not alone. This isn't just me. It's so powerful. And yet I don't think we're having the conversations enough to really break the silence and kind of stop that shame from festering. So what is the weight of the silence? What are we dealing with when we're not sharing our experiences, when we're keeping it all to ourselves? As I said, there is a lot of cultural pressure to enjoy every moment in motherhood. We are expected, like, especially if you chose to have kids and prepared to have kids, but even if you didn't, there's just this assumption that women should want to have kids and should be good at this and it should be easy and we should love it. But there's, for any mom, this expectation that you will and should enjoy every moment. You should be grateful for everything you have because some people aren't so lucky to have kids, right? Whatever the messages are, we are getting them constantly. And yeah, I love my kids. Yeah, I love spending time with my kids. Yes, even when things are really hard, and believe me, things have been really hard recently. My kids are going through a lot of transition. I'm going through a lot of transition. Like, there has been a lot of hard moments. I still love them in those hard moments. I do not enjoy every moment of being a mother. Whether that's moments with my kids, there are plenty of moments with my kids I do not enjoy, or just like the experience of me having to figure out the doctor's appointments and paying the bills and navigating like how to keep the house afloat and all these things. Like, I don't enjoy all of it. I'm not going to enjoy all of it, right? Like, I can be grateful for the roof over my head and also recognize that it kind of sucks being an adult and having to figure all this stuff out. But still, we are pressured to enjoy every moment. Like, that is the message we're getting constantly. And it can feel like everyone else just is enjoying the moment, right? They're enjoying motherhood. And if we're not seeing their struggles, if we're not sharing our struggles and having that validated and like reciprocated back to us, it can literally just feel like everybody is enjoying it all. So not only are we being told we should, but we're seeing everybody else doing it too. And it feels like we're falling short of that. Social media can also play a role in this. We talk about like the Pinterest mom and, having everything like Instagram worthy. I have strong feelings that social media can also be like an antidote. In my experience, after having my second son, it was a lot of like moms on social media talking about their experiences that really gave me this wake up call of, oh my goodness, I'm dealing with these struggles too. And it gave me the courage to speak out and get help. But social media can be like just reinforcing those pressures because we are only seeing what we're seeing. Regardless of how honest and open somebody is on social media, you're not seeing their whole life. You're not seeing those really, really hard moments where both kids are screaming and mom is crying and screaming and, whatever it is, right? I've used this example in the past, but I think it's just a really good one. When you're trying to get a little kid into a car seat and buckle them up, and there's a fighting match breaking out, and they are shoving and writhing, and you're trying to get them in, and you're rushed, and you might be stressed and saying things you don't want to be saying. You have to use both of your hands to do that. You can't be videoing it. Therefore, nobody is going to ever see that particular struggle. And that's just one little like micro example of how no matter how much somebody is sharing, you're not going to see the full story of their life and how much they're struggling. And so we just are constantly being met with this message of like, moms are doing it all. Moms are showing up and not having as hard of a time as I am. And that's a lot. And there is an emotional toll, a very real emotional toll of keeping those struggles bottled up. It can cause us to feel completely isolated again, like we're alone in this. No one else can relate to our struggles. It can cause deep anxiety, the kind of like, why am I doing so bad at this? I need to be better at this. And kind of that like feeling of constantly needing to be doing more because we see or believe other people are doing more. And it leads to that feeling of anxiety, right? And then, of course, shame can lead to immense shame when we feel like we are experiencing something that is so individualized to us and not what we're supposed to be experiencing. We're not supposed to be having these negative feelings about motherhood. We're not supposed to be finding this so damn hard. And that feels really shameful. It is very easy to feel ashamed when we are in that place of keeping all of that bottled up inside. But the thing is, and I'm going to quote Brene Brown again, shame thrives on secrecy, silence, and judgment. Silence is something that keeps shame in check. If we're not sharing our experiences, if we're not having any opportunity to be validated in our experiences, that shame can keep on going, can keep on growing. It can keep on making us feel like we are failing, like we are the worst mom in the world, like we are subpar humans because we're struggling. And the antidote to that is sharing your experiences. Now, I'm not going to say that like you need to blast it out to the world because obviously there can also be judgment that comes along with that. There are plenty of judgmental people out there who are actively working to perpetuate these messages of enjoy every moment. Good moms don't struggle, right? Like if you are struggling, you're doing a bad job. So I want to recognize that. I want to recognize that just because you share your experience doesn't mean you're going to be met with like love and support and validation. But if you can find like spaces and safe people to share your experiences with, or even just spaces to listen to the experiences of other people, right? Like listening to the challenges that moms have faced on this podcast when a guest shares a struggle they've had or a story they've had, and you can relate and be like, oh my gosh, wow, I felt so much shame about that happening to me, but I'm hearing somebody else talk about that. All of those things can start to break down the shame that thrives in secrecy, that spirals in silence. When we are vulnerable about our experiences, whether that's with a close friend or even a therapist or a coach, when we're vulnerable and open up about that, it literally, I guess figuratively, but feels literally lightens the load, right? Like it feels like this weight lifted off of you because so often when we're holding that in, it feels like crushing pressure. You know, when someone will ask you like, where do you feel it in your body? And I know for me, like the shame is often like a crushing pressure on my chest and on my shoulders, right? It's just like feels like this weight. And seriously, speaking something out loud and not being met with judgment in that experience can feel like the load is being lifted off. It's incredible what just being vulnerable about your own experiences can do. And what's cool about this is when you start having these conversations, right? When you start connecting with other moms and, you know, maybe mentioning that you had a hard morning, giving that space, giving little openings for others to share their experiences, there is so much room that opens up for empathy and connection with those other moms. And like I said, that kind of connection, that kind of coming together and uniting in our experiences is so incredibly valuable. I know for me at different parts of my motherhood journey, when I first became a mom at 23, I did not have other friends that had kids and was really quite isolated. And then we went right into the pandemic. And like, I just didn't have a lot of people who had kids in my life. Most of the people I knew that were moms were like my mom and her friends, right? Like that's who I had in my life. And it's just totally different experiences. And so there was a lot of shame in the things that I felt like I was getting wrong. And since my oldest has started school and since I have become friends with other moms and, you know, connected through my podcast with other moms and created really, really deep friendships with people who are mothers, not all my friends are moms, but the ones that are, there is so much space, again, for empathy and compassion and connection. And it goes both ways. And both ways, whether it's me sharing my hard morning that I had or listening to a mom share the guilt that she feels dropping her kid off at daycare, both of those things help me and help the other person that I'm in connection with. And when you start to think about that, like the connections that we have and how sharing with others and giving them the space to do that can have that impact on both us, like me as an individual, and them, the ripple effects of that then, because they now carry less shame in their experience and may be more open to sharing with others and creating other connections in their life and opening up in those ways. And it just provides us the space to really change things in this rippled way where the impacts can be super great just from us creating space to open up and creating space to be vulnerable, creating space for that empathy to kind of overtake the shame. So how do we go about doing this though, right? Because again, it can be hard, especially if you're not used to sharing vulnerably with people. If you are somebody who has traditionally bottled up these feelings and just sucked it up and even maybe don't even like to admit to yourself that you're struggling. How do we start to share these experiences? The first piece of advice I have is to find safe spaces with other moms. This can be something that feels scary and like a challenge, and I understand that. I really, really do. Being here listening to this podcast is a great place to start because, again, you are actively listening to stories that can help dissipate some of the shame you may feel in going through things alone, right? Even if you're not actively sharing, just hearing other women and other moms share stories can have an impact. But there are so many ways to find other moms. And again, it can feel scary, but there's opportunities out there. This group of women that I have been meeting with that have kids that are the age of my oldest son, it really was just two moms who said, you know what, we want connection with other moms. And they like made the effort to start this group. It was one of those things where when they shared how they decided to start the group, pretty much everyone in the room was like, oh my goodness, we have also been craving that kind of connection and just space to like talk and relate to each other. And it just was like the courage of these two women to come together and say, we're doing it. So if you can find even one other mom to work with to create a space, and it can just be you and that one other person, right? But you can start small. You can start with just kind of feeling out how somebody reacts. If you share that you had a hard morning, what is their reaction to that, right? And building those communities, again, so many other moms may be feeling that desire for community and connection, but also maybe dealing with the shame of the struggle or dealing with like feeling scared to be vulnerable. And so if you can take that first step, and again, taking it in a way that feels safe, it can be huge in just opening up the space and opportunity for that to happen. But these connections don't just have to be in person, right? There are so many communities out there. Facebook groups is a big one, connecting with people on Instagram. One of my very best friends I met virtually, and we talk all the time. She is somebody that when I'm having a hard day, I will let her know, and we validate each other's experiences. We tell each other when we are not being reasonable with the way we're thinking about our struggle, right? We'll call each other out and say, no, that is a normal experience. You do not have to feel shame about that. And even though we can't just go get a cup of coffee together, like the value of the friendship is there 100%. Like we get so much value out of the connection we have in our friendship, both as like just individual people, but as moms and the way we show up with our kids and knowing that like it's okay when things are hard because I know that I have somebody I can turn to and like check in with like, this was really hard. And they say, that's okay, right? Like it's huge. We need to hear it from other people sometimes. I'll also say, though, that sometimes it's a therapist, it's a coach, it's somebody who specializes in having these conversations. My therapist has been a godsend when it comes to like helping me work through feelings I have where I might feel really crappy about something that's happening with my kids. And especially through the divorce process, there's just been some things that I need to work out. And, you know, times where I'm feeling like I'm in survival mode and maybe that's not how I would have liked to have handled that with my kids, and having my therapist just have my back and say, you're going through a lot. Like it's okay. It's huge. And, you know, I want to say lucky in the therapist that I got, but really there was research and like the office that I went through set me up with someone who specializes in working with moms going through some of the things I'm going through, right? Like we can make choices in seeking out a therapist that is going to have the awareness to help validate our experiences and struggles and also like help us through them. And if you just have trusted friends that are not moms, sometimes they can be a space to go to too, right? Like they may not be able to relate to your struggles, but they can still offer support and validation that like there's nothing wrong with you. And I think sometimes that's all we need is like just somebody to say like, you're okay. You're not a bad mom for XYZ. It's okay to have a hard time. It's okay to struggle. Because these things are true not just in motherhood, in life too, right? Like it's okay if things aren't perfect, if we're not doing it all like great all the time, right? Beyond finding those safe spaces and connecting with others, you can start even smaller. You can start by journaling. Sometimes, like just getting the thoughts out of your head is enough to start opening the window for self compassion and for letting go of that shame. Like you write it down and recognize, that thought that I have about myself, that feeling that I have about this experience, maybe that's not necessarily true, right? Undeniably true, that I'm a bad mom because I shouted at my kid. When we can give ourselves a little bit of space between the thoughts we're having in our brain and write them down on paper, now there's space between us and this thought, it can have a huge impact. I'd say that like that may not be the final goal, right? We want to have these connections. We want to have the ability to share these things vulnerably with others, but it's a huge small step forward. And I will kind of leave this part of the conversation by saying that it is important to have discernment when you are choosing who to share things with. As I said, there are plenty of people who are out there perpetuating these messages that good moms enjoy every moment, that good moms can do it all, that good moms work outside of the home, or that good moms stay home and are caretaking for their kids 100% of the time. Like there are plenty of people out there perpetuating those messages, whether that's online or maybe even in your world. And there are people who, maybe are insecure about their own experiences. And instead of relating and validating and connecting through shared experiences, may just put you down to make you feel crummy about it too, right? Like that's a very real possibility. And so we do have to protect ourselves in that way, especially if like sharing these vulnerable things is new. You want to make sure that you're doing so in a way where you're not going to be met with exactly what you're trying to avoid in the first place. And so again, starting small, starting with people you trust, starting with little openings into conversations can be a great way to start making the connection, start opening the space without really putting yourself out there for people to like criticize. Because again, it can happen and it will happen if you are sharing your truth with the wrong people. So we have to use discernment, unfortunately, but that's just the reality. And I think knowing that there are people who are going to give you that backlash in the first place can be helpful in just knowing like, okay, that still doesn't mean there's something wrong with me, right? When it comes to these kinds of connections, when we do have those spaces to make connections, when we are in community with other moms, I just want to encourage you to be brave, honestly, and try and shift away from those surface level conversations, those updates. Oh, how was your day? Oh, how are you doing? And really like start being honest, start being curious about others' experiences. Start sharing your own. And that doesn't have to be like venting to another mom at pickup and just sharing all of your struggles that you've ever been through, but just starting to ask the questions, starting to share little bits about yourself and maybe the things that you're going through in your life, sharing a more real picture of yourself and being curious about their own life so that they have openings to share a more real picture about themselves. When we can model that vulnerability, it does inspire people to open up because, like I've said, there are so many of us that feel like we're alone in this journey of motherhood. And that goes for the people here listening to this conversation, but it also probably goes for a lot of the moms that you come into contact with every day that you just don't know what's going on in their life because you've never had the opportunity to really sit down and ask. So if we can kind of be that model in those little ways, it can have a huge impact. And I just encourage you, it does take courage to do that because it's, again, a lot of times not what we're naturally used to doing, being vulnerable with others, but we can kind of start that trend and start things off where it can be, again, a ripple effect and life-changing for people around us too. The biggest thing that I want you to take away from this conversation today is that you are not alone. If you are struggling, if you have hard moments, if you have hard seasons of motherhood where it feels like everything's hard, like you are not alone. There is nothing wrong with you. There are so many factors for why that may be the case, whether that's individual to your life or like these huge systemic societal issues we face, right? And feeling like we're alone in it is not only not true to reality, but it's not helpful. It doesn't help us move through that or feel okay about ourselves. It oftentimes just perpetuates that shame that makes everything 10 times worse. There is so much strength that comes in honesty and vulnerability. And again, it takes bravery. But if you can start to open up about your experiences and create those spaces and share in those spaces, the freedom that it brings, the like weight lifted off your shoulders that it can bring is incredible. It's huge. So I do encourage you to take one small step today to connect with another mom in your life, whether that is texting a friend and sharing something that happened over the weekend, or, getting to know another mom when you're dropping your kid off at school today, or even listening to this podcast and maybe sharing an episode with someone else so that you can be in community with somebody else who knows that these things are important, right? We all deserve to be validated in our experiences. We all deserve to feel like we are not alone and we are not bad moms just for having a hard time in a really hard experience, right? I appreciate you showing up here and listening to this conversation today. And I hope that it brought a little bit of relief to you, maybe if you are struggling with feeling like you're alone, because you're not. You're not alone. I'm not alone. We are all in this together. We have unique experiences, but it's hard for all of us in different ways, maybe. Yes, but we're all going through it at times. We will be back again next week with another episode of Worthy Mother podcast. I'm looking forward to May, where we will be having some episodes focused around Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month, really talking about mental health and motherhood and digging into some topics around that. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do so. And if you have not yet left a rating and review, I would also appreciate that. We'll leave it at that, and I'll see you next week. You are worthy, Mama.